Find the function of the form y equals f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c that passes through the points 1, 4, -1, -2, and 0, 0. This particular function, y equals f of x ax squared plus bx plus c, is a quadratic function, and we're trying to find the quadratic function. In other words, we're trying to find the coefficients a, b, and c that correspond to a quadratic that passes through those 3 points. You may have heard the saying, 2 distinct points determine a line. Well, this is the next level up from that, and this is 3 distinct non-collinear points determine a quadratic. So let's start out with these 3 points here and see what the meaning is. What this is saying when you see 1, 4 is that saying that f of 1 is equal to 4. When you see that -1, -2, that's the same as saying f of -1 is equal to -2. And when you see that 0, 0 lies on the quadratic, that's the same as saying f of 0 equals 0. So taking this first piece here, f of 1 is equal to 4, I'm going to go ahead and write out f of 1 here. And f of 1 turns out to be nothing more than a times 1 squared plus b times 1 plus c, and we know that is equal to 4. Let's take this second equation, f of -1 equals -2. Well, f of -1 will be a times -1 squared, and a times -1 squared is just a, plus b times -1, that's going to be minus b, plus c is equal to -2. Finally, how about f of 0 equals 0? Well, in that case, what we have is we have a times 0 squared plus b times 0 plus c is equal to 0. So what we have here is we have 3 equations in 3 unknowns, and we need to solve those equations. Now, we're very fortunate because this third equation is already solved for c. So we can take this c equals 0 and plug it into these first 2 equations, and then we will have reduced the system of equations to a plus b plus 0 equals 4, and a minus b plus 0 is equal to -2. So we already have one of the variables solved for in the first set, c equals 0. And so what we did was we plugged that c equals 0 into these 2 to reduce it to a system of equations that is 2 equations and 2 unknowns. Well, the next step here is to solve this 2 by 2 system of equations. And one thing you can do, this is called substitution, is we can solve this bottom equation for a, and then everywhere there's an a in the top equation, we can plug that in. There's a lot of different ways to solve it, but this is one way. So we can take a minus b is equal to -2, and we can solve that for a. The way you solve that equation for a is you add b to both sides of the equation. So when you add b to the left-hand side of the equation, you just get a. When you add b to the right-hand side of the equation, you get b minus 2. So now we know that a is equal to b minus 2, and we can now go up to the top equation, and everywhere we see an a, plug in a b minus 2. So let's do that here. So now what we have is we have b minus 2, that's the a, plus b is equal to 4. So we would like to solve that equation. And we see that we have b plus b, so that is 2 times b, minus 2 is equal to 4. Next step is to add 2 to both sides of that equation. When you add 2 to the left-hand side of the equation, you get 2b. When you add 2 to the right-hand side of the equation, you get 6. And finally, the last step to solve this equation is divide both sides by 2. When you divide the left-hand side by 2, you get b. When you divide the right-hand side by 2, you get 3. Now, at this point, we have c and we have b. The only thing that is missing is a. So we can take this b equals 3 and we can plug into either of these two equations. Let's just choose the top one, a plus b is equal to 4. That avoids any negatives. So the next step here is to say a plus b, and b happens to be 3, is equal to 4. The way you solve that equation for a is you subtract 3 from both sides. When you subtract 3 from the left-hand side, you get a. When you subtract 3 from the right-hand side, you get 1. So now we have all three pieces. A is equal to 1, b is equal to 3, and c is equal to 0. So to answer the question, I want to find the function of this form that passes through those 3 points. I have my a, b, and c, so I can write down that answer. So the solution in this case will be y is equal to f of x is equal to a, which is 1, times x squared, plus b, which is 3, times x, plus c, which is 0. And that is the quadratic function that passes through these 3 points. And if you wanted to go back and check, you could plug in and make sure that with this function right here, f of 1 is equal to 4, f of negative 1 is negative 2, and f of 0 equals 0, and they are.